The elevator doors slammed shut in Lucas Bennett's face, and with them, his last chance at survival. For 6 months, he'd scraped by on freelance coding gigs that barely covered rent in a one-bedroom apartment he shared with his 7-year-old daughter. This interview, this single shot at Orion Dynamics, was supposed to end the nightmare of overdue bills and Sophie's worried questions about why they ate rice and beans 5 nights a week. But now, watching those steel doors close, Lucas knew he was finished. Then he saw the woman collapsed on the sidewalk outside. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Lucas stood frozen in the marble lobby of Orion Dynamics, staring at his reflection in the polished elevator doors. His dress shirt, the only one he owned without frayed cuffs, was already damp with sweat despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. The security guard at the desk glanced up, then quickly away, as if Lucas's desperation was something contagious. 12th floor, senior developer position. 9:30 a.m. sharp. The email had been explicit about punctuality. Lucas checked his phone. 9:27 a.m. He'd made it. Barely. The subway from Brooklyn had been delayed, again, and he'd sprinted the last 4 blocks, his cheap dress shoes raising blisters on both heels. But he was here, 3 minutes early, heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Lucas pressed the elevator call button a second time, though the up arrow was already lit. His finger left a small smudge on the brass panel. He resisted the urge to wipe it away. Just get upstairs. Nail the technical questions, show them you're not just another desperate applicant. Except he was desperate. Desperately, pathetically, completely out of options. The elevator chimed. Lucas straightened his collar and stepped forward. "Hold it!" A woman's voice called from across the lobby. Lucas's hand shot out reflexively, but the doors were already sliding shut. Through the narrowing gap, he saw her. A middle-aged woman in a business suit, juggling a coffee cup and briefcase, still 20 feet away. The doors sealed with a soft pneumatic hiss. "Sorry," Lucas muttered to no one. He pressed the call button again. Watch the digital display above the doors climb. 3, 4, 5, 9:28 a.m. The second elevator was on the 8th floor, descending. Lucas shifted his weight, wincing at the pressure on his blistered heel. He'd walked Sophie to school that morning, couldn't afford the subway for both of them, and the extra 10 blocks had shredded his feet. Worth it, he told himself. Everything's worth it if you get this job. The display showed the second elevator stopping on the 6th floor, 5th floor, 4th, 9:29 a.m. "Come on," Lucas whispered. "Come on! Come on!" 3rd floor. Then it stopped. Lucas felt something cold settle in his stomach. The elevator hung there, unmoving, as precious seconds bled away. Someone on the 3rd floor was probably holding the door, chatting with a colleague, completely unaware they were destroying a stranger's life. 9:30 a.m. No. Lucas looked wildly around the lobby. There had to be another way up. Service elevator, stairs, something. The security guard was watching him now with undisguised curiosity. "Excuse me," Lucas called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Is there another way to the 12th floor?" The guard, a heavy-set man whose nameplate read Morris, pointed toward a door marked Exit in glowing red letters. "Stairs are through there, but that's 12 flights, man. You sure?" Lucas was already moving. He hit the stairwell door at a run, his briefcase, a battered leather thing he'd bought at a thrift store, banging against his hip. The concrete stairs stretched upward in a dizzying zigzag pattern. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a harsh, institutional glow. 1 flight, just 12 flights. "You can do this." Lucas took the stairs 2 at a time, his breath already coming in ragged gasps. His lungs burned, his legs screamed. The blisters on his heels felt like they were tearing open with each step. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Lucas ignored it. 4th floor, 5th. His briefcase felt like it was filled with stones. Lucas switched it to his other hand, never breaking stride. 6th floor. His vision started to blur at the edges. When was the last time he'd eaten? Yesterday's lunch? No, that had been a granola bar split with Sophie. Dinner had been the last real meal, and even that was just pasta with butter because he'd needed to save the marinara sauce for the rest of the week. 7th floor. Lucas's legs were trembling now, threatening to buckle. He grabbed the handrail, hauling himself upward through sheer force of will. Sophie needs this. Sophie needs you to make this work. 8th floor. The phone buzzed again. Lucas yanked it out, still climbing, and glanced at the screen. Sophie's school. Nurse's office. His heart stopped. Lucas froze on the landing between the 8th and 9th floors, staring at the notification. His finger hovered over the screen. No, not now. Please, not now. Another buzz. A voicemail this time. He couldn't listen. Not here, not in this stairwell, not when he was 3 minutes late to the interview that was supposed to save them both. But it was Sophie. Lucas pressed the phone to his ear, his hand shaking. Mr. Bennett, this is Diane from the nurse's office at PS 234. The woman's voice was professionally calm, which somehow made it worse. Sophie's running a fever, 101.2, and she's complaining of an earache. We need you to come pick her up as soon as possible. School policy requires... Lucas lowered the phone. Sophie was sick. The school needed him. The interview needed him. He couldn't be in both places. Think. There has to be a solution. Margaret, his elderly neighbor, the one who sometimes watched Sophie when he had late-night freelance calls with clients in California. She'd helped before. She'd help again. Lucas pulled up her contact, praying she'd answer. 3 rings, 4. Hello? Margaret, it's Lucas from 4B. I'm so sorry to bother you, but Sophie's sick at school, and I'm in the middle of something crucial. Is there any way... Oh, honey, I wish I could. I'm in New Jersey visiting my sister. Won't be back until Thursday. The hope in Lucas's chest crumbled. Right, of course. Is shit... Sorry to bother you. Is everything all right? Yeah, I'll figure it out. He ended the call and leaned against the concrete wall, the coolness seeping through his sweat-soaked shirt. The stairwell was silent except for the hum of the building's ventilation system and the rapid hammer of his own heartbeat. Sophie needed him. But this job, God, this job was their lifeline. The freelance work was drying up. He'd burned through his savings. Last month's rent had been late, and Mrs. Chen, their landlord, had been understanding in a way that made it clear her understanding had limits. Without this job, they'd be evicted by August. Maybe sooner. Lucas closed his eyes. What kind of father chooses a job interview over his sick daughter? What kind of father lets his daughter end up homeless? His phone buzzed again. The school, probably wondering why he hadn't responded. Lucas made his decision. He turned and started back down the stairs, each step feeling like a small death. By the time he reached the lobby, his eyes were burning with something that had nothing to do with exhaustion. Morris looked up from his desk. That was quick. Lucas didn't answer. He pushed through the revolving door and out onto the sidewalk, where the late May sunshine hit him like a slap. The city smelled like hot asphalt and exhaust fumes. Pedestrians flowed around him in both directions, everyone moving with purpose, everyone knowing where they belonged. Lucas pulled out his phone to call the school back. That's when he saw her. The woman was sprawled on the sidewalk about 30 feet away, half hidden behind a concrete planter filled with ornamental grasses. One hand clutched her ankle, the other pressed against the ground, as if she'd tried to stand and failed. She was maybe 30, dressed in expensive-looking athletic wear, the kind with moisture-wicking fabric and reflective strips. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and even from a distance, Lucas could see the pain etched across her face. People walked past her, not around her, past her, as if she were just another piece of urban furniture. A businessman in a gray suit stepped over her outstretched leg without breaking stride. 2 women in yoga clothes glanced down, exchanged a look, and kept going. Nobody stopped. Lucas looked at his phone. The school's number was still on the screen, waiting for him to call. Then he looked back at the woman. Not your problem, a voice in his head whispered. You've got enough problems. But he was already moving. Hey, Lucas called out, dropping to one knee beside her. Up close, he could see she'd been crying, not the dramatic sobbing kind, but the quiet, frustrated tears that came from pain and helplessness. Are you okay? What happened? The woman looked up at him, startled. Her eyes were a striking gray-green, currently rimmed with red. I twisted my ankle. I was running and I didn't see the... She gestured vaguely at an uneven section of sidewalk where the concrete had buckled. I can't put any weight on it. Did you call someone? An ambulance? I called my assistant, but she's not. I don't think she's nearby. The woman's voice was tight with pain. I just need to get inside. I work here. She nodded toward Orion Dynamics. 12th floor. Of course she did. Lucas glanced back at the building's entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see Morris at his desk, watching them with mild interest. Okay, Lucas heard himself say. Let me help you up. You don't have to. I know. He slid one arm behind her back and the other under her knees. She was lighter than he expected, or maybe adrenaline was lending him strength he didn't actually have. Either way, he lifted her carefully, trying to avoid jostling her injured ankle. Oh, God, she gasped. I'm so sorry. This is mortifying. Don't apologize. I've got you. Lucas carried her toward the building, acutely aware of the spectacle they must have made. A sweaty, rumpled man in an ill-fitting suit carrying a beautiful woman in designer athletic wear. Morris held the door open, his expression carefully neutral. Elevator? Lucas asked. The woman nodded, her jaw clenched against the pane. The same elevator that had closed in Lucas's face earlier now stood open and empty, as if mocking him. He carried her inside and used his elbow to press the button for the 12th floor. Thank you, the woman said quietly as the doors slid shut. Really? I can't believe everyone just walked past. People are busy. Lucas didn't know why he was making excuses for them. You stopped. Yeah, well. Lucas shifted her weight slightly, easing the strain on his lower back. I missed my elevator anyway. She looked at him more closely, taking in the dress shirt, the briefcase he'd dropped by the elevator bank, the general air of barely controlled panic that probably clung to him like cologne. You work here? No, I had an interview at 9:30. Lucas checked the elevator's display panel. 10th floor, 11th. So about 5 minutes ago. Oh no, I'm so sorry. It's fine. It wasn't fine. It was the opposite of fine. But what else was he supposed to say? The elevator chimed for the 12th floor. The doors opened onto a space that looked nothing like Lucas had imagined. He'd been picturing cubicles and fluorescent lights, the standard corporate landscape. Instead, he found himself looking at something that resembled a high-end hotel lobby, polished hardwood floors, modern art on the walls, and a massive reception desk made of what looked like solid walnut. The woman behind the desk, a 20-something with perfect posture and a headset, looked up and immediately went pale. Miss Sinclair, what happened? Should I call? I'm fine, Jessica. Just a twisted ankle. Can you? But Jessica was already moving, abandoning her post to rush toward them. 2 other employees emerged from a nearby conference room, their faces reflecting the same mix of concern and barely concealed panic. Lucas carefully set the woman, Ms. Sinclair apparently, down in one of the leather chairs that dotted the reception area. She winced as her foot touched the ground. Someone get ice, one of the employees said, a man in his 40s wearing frameless glasses. And call Dr. Patel. Tell him it's urgent. No doctors, Ms. Sinclair said firmly. It's just a sprain. Ice and elevation, that's all I need. But Marcus, ice, elevation. That's an order, not a suggestion. Marcus nodded and hurried off, though he didn't look happy about it. Miss Sinclair turned to Lucas, who had been edging toward the elevator, hoping to make his escape while everyone was distracted. Wait, she said. You mentioned an interview? It's not. I'm sure they've already filled the position. What position? Senior developer, Building 12, Suite 1240. Lucas recited the details automatically, even though they didn't matter anymore. But I'm 40 minutes late now, so... Jessica, Miss Sinclair cut in, call Suite 124. Oh, tell them we have a delayed candidate for the senior developer position and to please wait. Jessica blinked. I'm sorry, tell them to... Wait. Tell them I'm asking them to wait. The way she said it, calm, matter-of-fact, with the absolute certainty of someone who expected to be obeyed, made Lucas look at her more carefully. The expensive athletic wear, the employees treating her injury like a natural disaster, the walnut reception desk and art that probably cost more than his car. Who are you? Lucas asked. Ms. Sinclair smiled faintly. Someone who really appreciates you stopping to help. Now go. Suite 1240, down the hall, third door on the right. I can't just... You can and you will. Consider it payment for being a decent human being. She gestured at Jessica, who was already on the phone speaking in rapid, hushed tones. Go. Lucas went. The hallway stretched before him, all glass walls and modern minimalism. Through the windows, he caught glimpses of open-concept workspaces filled with people who looked impossibly young and competent, their multiple monitors displaying code and wireframes and data visualizations. Suite 1240 was marked with a brushed steel nameplate. Talent Acquisition. Lucas paused with his hand on the door handle, suddenly aware of how he must look. His shirt was wrinkled and sweat-stained. His hair was probably standing up in every direction. He smelled like the subway and 11 flights of stairs. But Mrs. Sinclair had called ahead. They were waiting for him. Sophie's waiting too, his conscience reminded him. Lucas pulled out his phone and quickly dialed the school. PS 234 Nurse's Office. Hi, this is Lucas Bennett, Sophie's father. I got your message about the fever. I'm so sorry, but I'm stuck in Manhattan for another hour. Is there any way she can wait in the office until I... Mr. Bennett, she really should go home. School policy. I understand. I'll be there as soon as I can. Please, just tell her I'm coming, okay? Tell her Dad's coming. He ended the call before the nurse could argue further and shoved the phone back in his pocket. Then he opened the door to suite 124. Oh! The woman at the desk looked up with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was younger than Lucas, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of professional polish that came from working in places like this. Mr. Bennett? That's me. They're ready for you in conference room B. She gestured toward a glass-walled room where 3 people sat around a table looking at a laptop screen. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Water would be great. She handed him a bottle from a small refrigerator under her desk. Not the cheap plastic kind, but glass, with a label that read, Icelandic glacial water in elegant typography. Lucas took a sip and immediately regretted it when he nearly choked. The water somehow tasted expensive. He wiped his mouth and approached conference room B. The 3 people inside looked up as he entered. A woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a severe bob. A younger man, maybe 30, with the kind of beard that required maintenance. And between them, a black woman about Lucas's age, wearing a deep purple blazer that somehow managed to look both professional and creative. The purple blazer smiled at him. Mr. Bennett, I'm Keisha Williams, Director of Development. This is Sandra Hoffman, VP of Talent, and James Chen, our lead architect. She gestured at the empty chair across from them. Please, sit down. We're glad you could make it. Lucas sat, trying to project confidence he absolutely didn't feel. I apologize for being late, he started. There was an incident outside. We heard, Keisha interrupted gently. Ava called us directly. Said you were helping someone who was injured. Ava? Miss Sinclair, our CEO. Keisha's expression was unreadable. She asked us to wait for you. So, here we are. CEO. The woman Lucas had carried into the building was the CEO of Orion Dynamics. Oh, Lucas said, because his brain had apparently stopped producing useful words. Sandra leaned forward, her fingers steepled under her chin. Tell us about yourself, Mr. Bennett. Your resume is impressive, but there's a significant gap in your employment history. 6 months since your last position at TechFlow Solutions. And just like that, they were into it. Lucas had practiced his answer to this question dozens of times, workshopped it until he could deliver it with casual confidence. But sitting here, in this glass box of a conference room with these people who could smell desperation like sharks smelling blood, the practiced words evaporated. I was laid off, he said simply. TechFlow restructured their entire engineering division, cut about 40% of the staff. I wasn't the only one, but that doesn't change the fact that I've been unemployed since November. And in that time, James asked, his pen poised over a legal pad, freelance work, contract coding, mostly small projects, website builds for local businesses, some database optimization, a couple of mobile apps. That must have been difficult, Keisha said. It wasn't quite sympathy in her voice, more like recognition. I have a daughter, Lucas said. 7 years old. Her mother's not in the picture, so yeah, it's been challenging. Challenging, what a pathetically inadequate word. Sandra made a note on her tablet. Let's talk about your technical background. You specialized in healthcare software at TechFlow, patient management systems primarily, electronic health records, appointment scheduling, prescription tracking. I led the team that rebuilt their entire back-end architecture about 2 years ago, cut processing time by 60%, reduced server costs by a third. James looked up from his notes. Using what stack? And just like that, Lucas was on familiar ground. They talked about programming languages and frameworks, about microservices versus monolithic architecture, about the particular challenges of healthcare data security and HIPAA compliance. Lucas felt himself relaxing incrementally, the words flowing more naturally as they dove into the technical details. This, at least, he knew. This, he could do. What about leadership experience? Keisha asked after they'd spent 20 minutes deep in the weeds of code optimization. I managed a team of 8 at TechFlow. Before that, I was a team lead at Metacorp for 3 years. Management style? Lucas paused, considering. Collaborative. I don't believe in micromanagement. Hire smart people, give them clear objectives, and get out of their way. But I'm also hands-on when needed. If someone's stuck on a problem, I don't just tell them to figure it out. I sit down with them, and we work through it together. What's your biggest weakness as a developer? James asked. The classic interview trap question. Lucas could give them the standard humble brag answer, I'm too much of a perfectionist, or I work too hard. But something about the way they were looking at him suggested they'd see right through that. I take things personally, Lucas said. When a project fails, even when it's not my fault, even when the failure is due to factors completely outside my control, I still feel responsible. I know that's not healthy. I know it leads to burnout. But I've never figured out how to turn it off. The room went quiet. Sandra and James exchanged a glance Lucas couldn't interpret. Keisha just nodded slowly. And why Orion Dynamics specifically? Why this position? Lucas had rehearsed an answer to this too. Something about the company's innovative approach to enterprise software, their reputation for work-life balance, their impressive client portfolio. But the practiced answer felt hollow. Honestly, Lucas said, I need this job. I've sent out maybe 200 applications in the last 6 months. I've made it to the final round of interviews 4 times. Each time they went with someone else, someone younger, someone cheaper, someone without a 6-month employment gap on their resume. He should stop talking. Everything in his head screamed at him to stop talking. He didn't stop. I'm $40,000 in debt. I'm 3 weeks behind on rent. My daughter's school nurse called me 20 minutes ago because Sophie has a fever, and I had to tell them I couldn't pick her up right away because I was here in this interview, hoping, his voice cracked, hoping that maybe this time would be different. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Sandra's expression had gone completely neutral, the professional mask of someone who'd sat through 1,000 interviews and heard every variety of desperation. James was looking at his notepad, his pen still, but Keisha was looking directly at Lucas, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. Your daughter's sick, she said quietly. Yeah. And you came to this interview anyway? Yeah. Why? Lucas met her gaze. Because if I don't get this job, we're going to be homeless. And I can't. He stopped, swallowed hard. I can't let that happen to her. But you stopped to help Ms. Sinclair, even though you were already late, even though it meant risking this interview entirely. What could he possibly say to that? That he'd been an idiot? That he should have kept walking like the other 17 people who'd passed her? My daughter watches everything I do, Lucas said finally. Every choice I make, every decision, she's watching, learning, and I can't teach her that success matters more than compassion, that getting ahead is more important than helping someone who's hurt. He rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. Even if it costs me everything, I can't teach her that. The room was silent again. Then Keisha closed her laptop and stood up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bennett. We'll be in touch. It was over. Lucas stood on shaking legs and shook hands with all 3 of them. Sandra's grip was firm and brief. James's was perfunctory. Keisha's lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Go get your daughter, Keisha said. She needs you. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice, and left the conference room. The receptionist smiled at him as he passed. Have a good day, Mr. Bennett. You too, he managed, The elevator ride down felt longer than the climb up the stairs. Lucas watched the numbers descend, 11, 10, 9, and tried not to think about how completely he'd just imploded any chance of getting hired. You told them you're broke. You told them you're desperate. You basically begged. Marcus, the man with the frameless glasses, was at the elevator bank on the 12th floor when the doors opened for someone else. He glanced in, did a double take when he saw Lucas. "Mr. Bennett?" "That's me. Miss Sinclair asked me to check on you. How did the interview go?" Lucas laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I think I set a new record for fastest self-sabotage." "I doubt that." Marcus smiled faintly. "This is Orion Dynamics. We've seen some spectacular implosions, but for what it's worth, I hope you get the job." "Thanks." The elevator reached the lobby. Lucas retrieved his briefcase from where he'd abandoned it and headed for the exit. Morris looked up from his desk. "You get sorted?" "Something like that." Outside, the city had gotten warmer. Heat rose from the pavement in visible waves, and the smell of hot asphalt was even stronger than before. Lucas pulled out his phone to figure out the fastest route back to Brooklyn. Subway would be quickest, but he'd have to spring for the fare twice now, once to get to Sophie's school and once to get them both home. $37 in his checking account. Subway fare was $2.90 per trip. He could make it work. His phone buzzed with a new email notification. Lucas almost ignored it, probably another rejection from one of the dozens of applications still floating in the void. But something made him look. The sender was Keisha Williams. Subject line: follow-up to today's interview. Lucas's heart stopped. They didn't send same-day rejections. Nobody sent same-day rejections. It was too cruel, too efficient. They always waited at least a day or two, let you marinate in hope before crushing it. His finger hovered over the email. "Don't open it. Not here. Not standing on a sidewalk in Manhattan while your daughter waits for you in Brooklyn." He opened it. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for meeting with us today under difficult circumstances. After consulting with the interview panel and with Ms. Sinclair, I wanted to reach out personally before you travel too far. We would like to continue the conversation. Would you be available for a second interview tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We understand you have responsibilities at home, so if that timing doesn't work, we're happy to accommodate your schedule. I know today was challenging. For what it's worth, we were impressed not just with your technical skills, but with your character. Best regards, Keisha Williams, Director of Development, Orion Dynamics." Lucas read the email 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding something. They wanted a second interview. They were impressed. They wanted to continue the conversation. His phone buzzed again. A call this time, from an unknown number with a Manhattan area code. Lucas answered without thinking. "Hello? Mr. Bennett? This is Ava Sinclair, the CEO, the woman he'd carried into the building, the woman whose ankle was currently elevated with ice on the 12th floor. Ms. Sinclair, how's your ankle?" "Swollen and painful, but I'll survive. I wanted to thank you personally for your help earlier, and to apologize for making you late." "You didn't make me late. I was already—" "Cutting it close, I know. Keisha told me." There was a pause, and Lucas could hear voices in the background. "She also told me you have a daughter who's sick and waiting for you." "Yeah, I should actually go." "Absolutely. But before you do, I wanted to ask you something." Another pause. "Why did you stop this morning on the sidewalk? You had every reason to keep walking. You were late. You were desperate for this job. And helping a stranger wasn't going to change any of that. So why did you stop?" Lucas looked up at the building, its glass and steel facade reflecting the afternoon sun. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I saw you there and I just couldn't walk past." 17 people did. "I'm not 17 people." Ava Sinclair laughed, a genuine sound, warm and a little surprised. No, you're not. Get to your daughter, Mr. Bennett. We'll talk tomorrow." She hung up before he could respond. Lucas stood there on the sidewalk, holding his phone, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. Then he started walking toward the subway, his blistered heels screaming with every step, his heart somehow lighter despite everything. Maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. Sophie was asleep by the time Lucas got her home. He'd found her curled up in the nurse's office, with her backpack as a pillow, her cheeks flushed with fever, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. The nurse, Diane, a woman who'd seen Lucas pick up his sick daughter more times than he cared to count, had given him that look. The one that said she understood he was trying his best, but questioned whether his best was actually good enough. "She's been asking for you," Diane had said, handing him a bottle of children's ibuprofen. "Every 10 minutes. When's my dad coming?" The guilt had settled in Lucas's chest like a stone. Now back in their apartment, he tucked Sophie into bed and pressed his hand against her forehead. Still warm, but the ibuprofen was starting to work. Her breathing was steady. Her small body relaxed under the thin comforter decorated with faded unicorns. Lucas sat on the edge of her bed and just watched her for a moment. 7 years old, 2nd grade. She liked dinosaurs more than princesses, could recite the entire periodic table because she'd decided chemistry was cool, and still believed her father could fix anything. That last part was getting harder to maintain. Their apartment, if you could call it that, was a 1-bedroom in a building that should have been condemned a decade ago. Lucas slept on a pull-out couch in what the landlord generously called a living area. The kitchen was 3 feet of counter space and a refrigerator that hummed like it was constantly on the verge of death. The bathroom had tile from the 1970s and water pressure that ranged from weak drizzle to aggressive mist. But it was theirs, for now. Lucas stood up carefully, trying not to wake Sophie, and walked to the kitchen. His phone sat on the counter where he'd left it, the screen dark. He picked it up and reread Keisha's email for the 10th time. "Second interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. It felt like a trick, like he'd wake up and discover he'd imagined the whole thing. The injured woman on the sidewalk, the CEO calling him personally, the actual possibility that something might finally go right. Lucas opened his email and started typing a response. "Miss Williams, thank you for the opportunity. I can be there at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I appreciate your flexibility. Lucas Bennett." He read it over 3 times, deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Too formal, too casual, too desperate, not grateful enough. Finally, he just sent the middle version and put the phone down before he could second-guess himself into paralysis. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient noise of the city, sirens in the distance, neighbors arguing through thin walls, the rattle of the ancient radiator, even though it was May and nobody needed heat. Lucas made himself a sandwich, peanut butter on bread that was 2 days from going stale, and ate it standing at the counter. He should sleep. Tomorrow was important. Tomorrow might change everything. Instead, he opened his laptop and checked his bank account. $37.42. Rent was due in 6 days. He owed Mrs. Chen $2,100, and that was after she'd generously agreed to let him skip last month entirely, adding it to what he already owed. Even if he got this job, which was far from guaranteed, he wouldn't see a paycheck for at least 2 weeks, maybe a month, depending on their pay schedule. Lucas closed the laptop and pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. One problem at a time. Get through tomorrow. Figure out the rest later. His phone buzzed. For a wild moment, Lucas thought it might be Keisha again, or maybe even Ava Sinclair. But the caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize with a 718 area code. Brooklyn. He answered. "Hello? Mr. Bennett, this is Robert Chen from Chen Property Management. Mrs. Chen's son, the one who handled the business side of his mother's rental properties, which mostly meant calling tenants about late rent and overdue payments." Lucas's stomach dropped. "Mr. Chen, hi. I wanted to touch base about the outstanding balance on your unit. You're currently 2 months behind, which brings the total to $4,200. I know, I'm working on it. I actually have a job interview tomorrow that looks really promising." "That's great to hear." Robert's voice had the practiced smoothness of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. "But I need to be clear about the timeline here. My mother's been very patient, but we need to see payment by the end of the month. That's 5 days. 5 days for $4,000. Plus June's rent, which will be due on the 1st. So realistically, we're looking at $6,300 total." Lucas leaned against the counter, feeling the world tilt slightly. "Mr. Chen, I don't have that kind of money. Even if I get this job tomorrow, I won't have it by the end of the month. I can probably give you half by mid-June and the rest by—" "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, I really am, but we can't continue to carry the debt. If we don't receive full payment by May 31st, we'll have to begin eviction proceedings. I have a daughter. She's 7. You can't just... I understand this is difficult, but from a business perspective, we've already extended well beyond what's reasonable. Robert paused. Look, my mother likes you. She thinks you're a good father trying to do right by your kid. That's why she's given you this much time. But she's running a business, not a charity. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he'd never been late on rent until he lost his job, that he'd always kept the place clean, that he'd even fixed the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink himself, rather than bothering Mrs. Chen about it. But Robert Chen didn't care about any of that. I'll get you the money, Lucas said quietly. By May 31st? Yes. It was a lie. They both knew it was a lie. I hope so, Mr. Bennett. I really do. Robert hung up. Lucas set the phone down very carefully, afraid that if he moved too quickly, he might throw it against the wall. $6,300 in 5 days. He had $37.42. The math didn't math, as Sophie would say. Lucas walked to the window and looked out at the Brooklyn street below. A bodega on the corner, still open despite the late hour. A group of teenagers clustered around a car with its bass turned up too loud. A woman walking a small dog, her phone pressed to her ear. Normal people living normal lives, probably not calculating how many meals they could skip to make the rent. His phone buzzed again. Lucas almost didn't check it. He'd had enough bad news for one day. But it was a text this time, from another unknown number. Hi, Lucas. This is Ava Sinclair. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to check that your daughter is okay. Lucas stared at the message. The CEO of Orion Dynamics was texting him at 8:47 p.m. to ask about Sophie. He typed back, "She's okay, fever's down. Thanks for asking." The response came almost immediately. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. What does that mean? You'll see. Sleep well, Lucas. Lucas read the messages 3 more times, trying to extract hidden meaning from 14 words. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Either that was good news, or he was about to walk into something he wasn't prepared for. Probably both. He checked on Sophie one more time, still asleep, her fever definitely lower, and then forced himself to lie down on the pull-out couch. The mattress had a spring that dug into his lower back, no matter how he positioned himself, and the blanket was too thin for comfort, but too warm to sleep under completely. Lucas closed his eyes and tried to quiet his brain. Second interview. Ava Sinclair, $6,300, 5 days. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of dreams about elevators that never arrived and doors that closed just as he reached them. The next morning, Sophie's fever was gone. She woke up at 6:30 a.m., completely recovered and full of questions about why she'd missed the end of school yesterday and whether Lucas had brought home any homework for her. You were sick, Soph. You don't have to worry about homework. But Mrs. Kimura was going to teach us about photosynthesis. I wanted to learn about photosynthesis. Lucas made her oatmeal, the instant kind because it was cheap and filling, and watched her eat while simultaneously explaining how plants converted sunlight into energy. 7 years old and already smarter than half the adults he knew. Dad? Sophie looked up from her bowl, a milk mustache on her upper lip. Are you okay? I'm fine, kiddo. Why? You have that look. What look? The one you get when you're worried about something, but you don't want me to know you're worried. Lucas tried to smile. I'm not worried. Sophie gave him the look, the one that said she was 7, not stupid. I have another interview today, Lucas admitted, for a really good job. I'm just nervous. You'll do great. She said it with such complete confidence that Lucas almost believed her. You're the smartest person I know. You don't know that many people yet. I know enough. Sophie finished her oatmeal and carried her bowl to the sink. What time is the interview? 10. I need to leave by 9 to make sure I'm not late. Then you should go now. It's only 7. But what if the subway breaks? Or what if there's traffic? Or what if you get there and you need time to calm down first? Sophie climbed onto the couch next to him, her small face serious. You should always go early to important things. That's what you told me about my science fair presentation. Lucas pulled her into a hug, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, the cheap drugstore kind that somehow still managed to smell like apples. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more now. Margaret, the neighbor, couldn't watch Sophie today, still in New Jersey, so Lucas called the school and explained that Sophie had recovered, but he had an important appointment and needed to bring her in late. The secretary, who knew their situation better than Lucas would have liked, agreed without asking too many questions. By 8:15, Lucas and Sophie were on the subway heading into Manhattan. Sophie pressed her face against the window, watching the darkness of the tunnel rush past. She'd brought a book, something about a girl who traveled through time, and read it with the kind of intense focus that made the rest of the world disappear. Lucas envied that ability. His own brain wouldn't shut up, running through every possible scenario for today's interview. What if they offer you the job and the salary's too low to matter? What if they don't offer you anything at all? What if yesterday was a fluke and today they realize you're not worth the trouble? The subway lurched, and Sophie looked up from her book. Dad, breathing. What? You're doing the thing where you forget to breathe normally, in through your nose, out through your mouth, like we practiced. They'd practiced it together during one of Lucas's particularly bad anxiety spirals last month. Sophie had read about it in one of her science books and insisted they try it. Lucas took a deliberate breath, in through his nose, out through his mouth. Sophie nodded approvingly and went back to her book. They arrived at Orion Dynamics at 9:20, 40 minutes early, just like Sophie had suggested. The lobby looked different in morning light, still intimidating, still far too nice for someone like Lucas, but somehow less oppressive. Morris was at the security desk again, and he actually smiled when he saw Lucas approaching. Back again, huh? Back again. Morris glanced at Sophie. This must be the daughter. This is Sophie. Sophie, this is Mr. Morris, Sophie waved. Hi? You feeling better? Your dad mentioned you were sick yesterday. I had a fever, but it's gone now. Probably just a virus. My dad gave me ibuprofen and made sure I stayed hydrated. Morris laughed. Smart kid. I know, Sophie said without a trace of arrogance. It was just a fact. Lucas signed in at the desk, and Morris handed him a visitor badge. 12th floor, right? That's the one. Good luck up there. The elevator ride felt shorter today, maybe because Sophie was with him, chattering about her book, and asking whether Lucas thought time travel would ever be scientifically possible. Probably not in our lifetime, Lucas said. But theoretically. Theoretically, a lot of things are possible. The doors opened on the 12th floor. Jessica was at the reception desk, and her eyes widened when she saw Sophie. Mr. Bennett, you're early. She glanced at Sophie, then back at Lucas. Is everything... My daughter had to come with me. I hope that's not a problem. She'll be quiet, I promise. I brought a book, Sophie added helpfully, holding it up. Jessica looked uncertain. Let me just check with Ms. Williams. She picked up her phone and spoke in low tones, too quiet for Lucas to hear. He felt Sophie slip her hand into his. It's okay, she whispered. They're not going to be mad about me being here. How do you know? Because you said this is a good company. Good companies don't get mad at people for bringing their kids when they have to. Lucas hoped she was right. Jessica hung up and smiled, a real smile this time, not the professional mask. Ms. Williams says it's fine, conference room B, same as yesterday. Can I get Sophie anything? We have juice boxes in the break room. Can I have one? Sophie asked, looking up at Lucas. Sure, kiddo. Jessica led them down the hallway, the same glass-walled corridor Lucas remembered from yesterday. Through the windows, he could see the morning bustle of a tech company coming to life. People clustered around standing desks, gesturing at monitors. A woman wrote something on a whiteboard while 3 people watched. Someone laughed, the sound muffled by the glass. It looked like the kind of place Lucas had forgotten he could belong to. Conference room B was empty except for Keisha Williams, who stood by the window with a coffee mug that read, I void warranties. She turned when they entered, and her expression shifted when she saw Sophie. Miss Williams, this is my daughter Sophie. I apologize for bringing her, but... Don't apologize. Keisha walked over and crouched down to Sophie's eye level. Hi, Sophie. I'm Keisha. I work with your dad. Well, potentially work with your dad. You feeling better? Your dad mentioned you were sick yesterday. I'm fine now. It was just a fever. Those are the worst. I'm glad you're okay. Keisha straightened up and looked at Lucas. The others will be here in a few minutes. Sophie, you're welcome to sit here, or Jessica can set you up in the break room if you'd prefer. We have pretty good Wi-Fi. I'll stay here, Sophie said. I have my book. Perfect. Sophie settled into one of the chairs and opened her book, immediately absorbed. Keisha gestured for Lucas to step into the hallway. I want to be up front with you, she said once they were out of Sophie's earshot. Today's interview is different from yesterday. Lucas's stomach tightened. Different how? Yesterday was about assessing your technical fit. Today's about something else. Keisha paused, choosing her words carefully. Ava Sinclair doesn't usually involve herself in hiring decisions. She's the CEO. She has people for this. But after what happened yesterday, she's interested. In you specifically. I don't understand. You will. Keisha checked her watch. She'll be here in 10 minutes. Just be yourself, Lucas. That's what got you this far. Before Lucas could ask what that meant, Keisha's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled slightly. Speak of the devil. She's on her way up. Lucas's heart started racing. He'd carried Ava Sinclair into this building yesterday. He'd gotten a personal phone call from her. But somehow, the idea of sitting across from her in a professional context felt infinitely more terrifying. Breathe, Keisha said, echoing Sophie's advice from earlier. You're going to be fine. Ava Sinclair arrived exactly 10 minutes later. She looked completely different from the injured jogger Lucas had helped yesterday. Today she wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of his rent, her dark hair styled in a way that looked effortless, but definitely wasn't. The only sign of yesterday's incident was a slight limp as she walked. Mr. Bennett. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming back. Lucas shook it, acutely aware of how sweaty his palms were. Miss Sinclair. How's your ankle? Sprained, like I thought. I'm supposed to stay off it for a week. She smiled wryly. I'm not great at following medical advice. Most people aren't. No, I suppose they're not. Ava glanced past him into the conference room where Sophie was visible through the glass wall. Is that your daughter? Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't have anyone to watch her this morning, and Lucas, stop apologizing for being a parent. Ava's voice was gentle but firm. Can I meet her? Before Lucas could respond, Ava walked into the conference room. Sophie looked up from her book, her eyes widening slightly at this new person who carried herself like someone important. Hi, Ava said. You must be Sophie. I'm Ava. Sophie set down her book carefully, using her finger to mark her place. Hi. You're the lady my dad helped yesterday. I am. He told you about that? He tells me everything. Sophie paused. Well, most things. Sometimes he tries to hide the bad stuff, but I can usually tell. Ava laughed, the same genuine sound Lucas had heard on the phone yesterday. I do the same thing with my family. Doesn't work very well, does it? Nope. Sophie studied Ava with the unnerving directness of a 7-year-old. Is your ankle okay? It's getting better. Hurts a bit when I walk. You should keep it elevated when you sit, and ice it for 20 minutes every 2 hours. That's what my dad always tells me when I get hurt. That's very good advice. Ava glanced at Lucas, her expression unreadable. Your dad sounds pretty smart. He is. He's a software engineer. He knows like 6 programming languages, and he can fix basically anything. Lucas felt his face getting hot. Sophie, what? It's true. Sophie turned back to Ava. Are you going to give him the job? The room went silent. Ava's smile didn't falter. That's actually what we're here to talk about. Oh, okay. Sophie picked up her book again. I'll be quiet now. Ava gestured for Lucas to follow her back into the hallway, and this time Keisha joined them. I like her, Ava said once they were out of earshot. She's got good instincts. She's 7, Lucas said. She doesn't have a filter yet. I hope she never develops one. The world needs more people who say what they actually mean. Ava leaned against the wall, taking the weight off her injured ankle. Lucas, I'm going to cut through the usual interview nonsense because I think we're past that. Yesterday, 17 people walked past me. You didn't. That tells me something about your character. I just did what anyone... Don't minimize it. Ava's voice was sharp now. I spent 2 years building this company from nothing. I've sat through hundreds of interviews, hired dozens of people, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that character matters more than talent. Because talent without character is just potential for disaster. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. Keisha jumped in. We reviewed your technical portfolio last night. Your work at TechFlow was exceptional. exceptional. The back-end rebuild you led saved them millions. But what really caught our attention was your freelance work. She pulled out a tablet and showed Lucas a familiar interface, one of the patient management systems he'd built for a small clinic in Queens. This, Keisha said, is exactly the kind of thinking we need. Clean, efficient, user-focused. You designed this for people who aren't tech-savvy, and it shows. It's for a pediatric clinic, Lucas said. The nurses needed something simple because they're dealing with sick kids and panicked parents. Complicated software just gets in the way. Exactly. Ava straightened up, wincing slightly. Which brings me to why I'm here. We're launching a new division, Pediatric Healthcare Technology. Software that helps families manage chronic illnesses at home, remote monitoring, medication tracking, doctor-patient communication. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. I need someone to lead the development team, Ava continued. Someone who understands both the technical side and the human side. Someone who can build software that doesn't just work, but actually helps people. You're offering me a leadership position. I'm offering you the chance to build something that matters. Ava met his eyes. The salary is $140,000 base plus equity. Full benefits, flexible hours, 4 weeks PTO. We'll cover relocation costs if you need to move closer to the office, but we're also fine with hybrid work. Lucas's brain stuttered to a halt. $140,000. He'd been hoping for maybe $90,000 if he was lucky. His voice came out strangled. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Ava smiled. Take 24 hours. Talk to Sophie. Make sure this is what you want. But Lucas, I need you to understand something. I'm not offering you this job because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because I think you're the right person for it. We've interviewed 12 candidates for this position, Keisha added. All of them had impressive resumes. None of them had what you have. Which is what? Heart, Ava said simply. Through the glass wall, Lucas could see Sophie reading her book, completely oblivious to the fact that her father's entire life had just tilted on its axis. $140,000 a year. He could pay off the debt, catch up on rent, get Sophie into a better school maybe, buy her new clothes instead of thrift store hand-me-downs. They could breathe again. I don't need 24 hours, Lucas heard himself say. I accept. Ava's smile widened. You sure? No pressure to decide right now? I'm sure. Then welcome to Orion Dynamics. She extended her hand again, and this time when Lucas shook it, it felt like sealing a promise. Keisha pulled out her phone. I'll get HR started on the paperwork. When can you start? Whenever you need me. How about Monday? That gives you a few days to get things sorted at home. Monday, 4 days away. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. There's one more thing, Ava said. I'd like to take you to breakfast. No business talk, just a chance to get to know each other outside of interview mode. Sophie's welcome to join, obviously. You don't have to. I want to. Ava checked her watch. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here, best pancakes in Manhattan, and they have a kids menu that's actually good. What do you say? Lucas looked at Sophie through the glass, then back at Ava. Okay, he said. Breakfast sounds good. The cafe Ava mentioned turned out to be one of those places that looked unassuming from the outside, but revealed itself as something special once you stepped through the door. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, and the smell of fresh coffee strong enough to make Lucas's mouth water. Sophie's eyes went wide when she saw the menu. They have chocolate chip pancakes, she whispered, like she was afraid saying it too loud might make them disappear. And French toast, and waffles. Get whatever you want, kiddo. Sophie looked up at him, suspicious. Really? Lucas understood her hesitation. For the past 6 months, whatever you want had meant pick the cheapest thing on the menu and we'll split it. Really, he confirmed. Ava was already seated at a corner booth, her injured ankle propped on the opposite bench. She'd removed her suit jacket, and without it she looked younger, less CEO, and more like a regular person who happened to run a tech company. I ordered coffee, she said as Lucas and Sophie slid into the booth across from her. Hope that's okay. They have good hot chocolate too if Sophie wants some. I'd like hot chocolate, please, Sophie said, remembering her manners. A waitress appeared almost immediately, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a notepad that had seen better days. She smiled at Sophie first, which Lucas appreciated. What can I get you, sweetheart? Sophie ordered the chocolate chip pancakes with a side of bacon. Lucas asked for the breakfast special because it was the most food for the price, then immediately regretted the reflex. He had a job now, a real job with a salary that would actually cover rent and food and maybe even savings. The concept felt foreign. Ava ordered an omelet and extra coffee, then waited until the waitress left before speaking. So, tell me about you, Lucas. The real version, not the resume version. Lucas wrapped his hands around the coffee mug that had appeared in front of him. Not much to tell. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to Penn State for computer science, moved to New York for work, met Sophie's mom during my second year at Medicorp. Is she still in the picture? It was a personal question, maybe too personal for a business breakfast. But something about the way Ava asked, direct but not invasive, made Lucas answer honestly. No, she left when Sophie was 8 months old. Postpartum depression that turned into something worse. One day I came home from work and she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't do it anymore. Sophie was coloring on the paper placemat the waitress had provided, apparently not listening. But Lucas knew better. She heard everything. Have you heard from her since? Ava asked quietly. Christmas cards for the first 2 years? Then nothing. Lucas took a sip of coffee, using it as an excuse to pause. I tried to find her once, about 3 years ago. Thought Sophie deserved to know her mother, but the trail went cold in Colorado, and I didn't have the money to keep looking. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're doing okay. Lucas glanced at Sophie, who was now drawing what appeared to be a very detailed dinosaur. Better than okay, actually. Ava followed his gaze and smiled. She's a great kid. She is. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I can hear you, Sophie said without looking up from her drawing. I know. That's why I said it. The food arrived faster than Lucas expected. Sophie's pancakes were the size of dinner plates, stacked 3 high with chocolate chips that had melted into gooey pools. His breakfast special came with eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. Enough food for 2 meals if he was being honest. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Ava set down her fork and looked at Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. Can I ask you something? Sure. Yesterday, on the sidewalk, you said you stopped because you couldn't walk past. What did you mean by that? Lucas thought about it while he chewed a piece of toast. My dad was a firefighter, he said finally. Died in a building collapse when I was 16. But before that, he used to say this thing, you help because you can, not because you should. He meant that helping people shouldn't be about obligation or what's expected. It should be about recognizing that you have the ability to make someone's day less terrible and choosing to do it. That's a good philosophy. It's harder than it sounds, especially when helping someone might cost you something, like a job interview. Yeah, like that. Lucas met her eyes. But I figured if I got the job by walking past someone who needed help, it wouldn't be worth having. And if I didn't get the job because I stopped, then at least I could look at myself in the mirror. Ava was quiet for a moment, turning her coffee mug in her hands. I started Orion Dynamics 5 years ago, she said. Quit my job at a Fortune 500 company, maxed out my credit cards, and built the whole thing from my apartment. People thought I was crazy. Were they right? Probably. But I was also tired of working for companies that only cared about profit margins and shareholder value. I wanted to build something that actually mattered, something that helped people, not just made money off them. Sophie looked up from her pancakes. Did it work? Ava smiled at her. It's working. Some days better than others. But yeah, I think it's working. That's good, Sophie said seriously. My dad says work should mean something, not just be about money. Your dad's right. Lucas felt his face getting warm again. Sophie, eat your pancakes before they get cold. They're already cold. I've been talking. Then eat them before they get colder. Sophie rolled her eyes but went back to eating, leaving the adults to their conversation. Ava leaned back against the booth, wincing slightly as she adjusted her ankle. You should really stay off that, Lucas said. I know, but I have 3 meetings this afternoon and a board call at 4. Staying off it isn't really an option. Your board would understand if you rescheduled. My board would see it as weakness. Tech industry doesn't have much patience for human limitations. She said it lightly, but Lucas heard the edge underneath. That's ridiculous. That's reality. Ava picked at her omelet. When you're a woman running a tech company, you're always one mistake away from people questioning whether you should be in charge. Taking a day off for a sprained ankle? That's blood in the water. Lucas hadn't thought about it that way. He'd been so focused on his own struggles that he'd forgotten other people had their own versions of impossible. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're doing a pretty good job. You've known me for 2 days, long enough to see that your employees respect you, that your company has values beyond profit, that you personally vetted a candidate instead of just trusting your hiring team. Lucas paused. And that you're sitting here having breakfast with someone you barely know because you think character matters. So yeah, I think you're doing a good job. Ava's expression softened. You know what? I'm really glad you stopped yesterday. Me too. They finished breakfast while Sophie explained her drawing. It was, in fact, a velociraptor, and she had very strong opinions about how Jurassic Park had gotten their depiction wrong. They had feathers, she insisted. All the scientific evidence says they had feathers. But the movie made them look like big lizards because it's scarier. So you're saying Jurassic Park lied to us? Ava asked with mock seriousness. Not lied, just chose drama over accuracy. That's a very diplomatic way to put it. Sophie beamed. When the check came, Ava grabbed it before Lucas could even reach for his wallet. My treat, she said. Consider it a signing bonus. You already gave me a signing bonus. It's called $140,000. Then consider it a thank you for yesterday. Ava pulled out a credit card, black, which Lucas was pretty sure meant it had no limit. Besides, I expensed it as a business meal. The company's paying. Lucas wanted to argue, but Sophie was giving him a look that said, just say thank you and don't make it weird. Thank you, he said. Outside the cafe, the morning had turned bright and warm. Manhattan in late May, right before the summer heat made the city unbearable. Sophie skipped ahead of them, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. I should get her to school, Lucas said. Of course. Ava checked her phone. I've got a car coming in 5 minutes. We can drop you both off. You don't have to… Lucas, stop being so determined to do everything the hard way. A black sedan pulled up to the curb exactly 5 minutes later. The driver, a man in his 30s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Lucas's entire wardrobe, got out and opened the back door. Miss Sinclair? Thanks, David. We're making a stop in Brooklyn first. If David found this unusual, his face didn't show it. Sophie climbed into the car with wide eyes, running her hand over the leather seats. This is fancy, she whispered to Lucas. Best behavior, he whispered back. The drive to Sophie's school took 20 minutes in morning traffic. Ava spent most of it on her phone, typing emails with the kind of speed that suggested she did this constantly. But when they pulled up to PS 234, she put the phone away and turned to Sophie. It was really nice meeting you, Sophie. You too. Thanks for the pancakes. You're welcome. Take care of your dad, okay? He seems like he needs someone to remind him to take care of himself. Sophie nodded solemnly. I know. He's really bad at it. Lucas helped Sophie out of the car and walked her to the school entrance. Other kids were filing in, backpacks and lunchboxes, and that particular chaos of elementary school mornings. Dad? Sophie turned to look at him before going inside. Yeah? This is going to be good, right? The new job? Lucas crouched down to her level. Yeah, Soph, I think it's going to be really good. Okay. She hugged him quickly, then pulled back. Oh, and I like her. Who? Ms. Sinclair, Ava, whatever we're supposed to call her. Sophie adjusted her backpack straps. She's nice. You should be friends with her. Before Lucas could respond to that, Sophie was gone, disappearing into the stream of children heading into the building. Lucas walked back to the car where Ava was still visible through the tinted window, back on her phone. He climbed in beside her, and David pulled away from the curb without needing to be told where they were going. She's something else, Ava said, still looking at her phone. That's one way to put it. I mean it. She's confident without being arrogant, curious without being annoying. You've done a good job with her. I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. Ava looked at him then, really looked at him. You know what I noticed yesterday? When you were late to the interview, when everything was falling apart, you never once blamed Sophie for being sick. Most people would have. They'd have been angry at the situation, angry at their kid for needing them at an inconvenient time. She didn't choose to get sick. Exactly. But not everyone sees it that way. Ava put her phone in her bag. My father was the opposite. Everything was always someone else's fault. If work went badly, it was my mother's fault for distracting him. If I got sick, it was my fault for being weak. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. I'm not telling you this to dump my trauma on you, but Ava continued. I'm telling you because I want you to understand why I offered you this job. Yes, you're talented. Yes, your technical skills are exactly what we need. But more than that, you're the kind of person I want building software for families. Someone who actually gives a damn about people. The car stopped at a red light, and through the window Lucas could see a woman pushing a stroller, a man walking a dog. Normal people living normal lives. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Of course. Why were you running alone yesterday? I mean, you're the CEO of a major company. Don't you have security or assistants or people who follow you around? Ava laughed. I have an assistant. Her name is Marie, and she's excellent at her job. But I don't have security because I refuse to live like I'm in danger every second of every day. And I run alone because it's the only time I get to think without someone needing something from me. That makes sense. Does it? Because my board thinks it's reckless. My mother thinks it's stupid. My ex-husband... She stopped abruptly. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my ex-husband. You were married? For 3 years, divorced for 2. Ava looked out the window. He wanted me to give up the company and be a proper wife. I wanted to build something that mattered. Turns out those two things don't mix well. His loss. That's generous of you. It's accurate. Anyone who asks you to give up something you built from nothing isn't worth keeping around. Ava smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You sound very certain about that. I am. Sophie's mom left because she couldn't handle being a parent. Part of me will always wonder if I could have done something different, said something better, been someone else. But the truth is, she made her choice. And I made mine. Which was? To be the parent Sophie deserved, even if I had no idea what I was doing. The car pulled up in front of Lucas's apartment building, and he suddenly saw it through Ava's eyes. The crumbling brick facade, the rusted fire escape, the group of teenagers smoking on the front steps, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. This is me, Lucas said, reaching for the door handle. Lucas, wait. Ava touched his arm lightly. I meant what I said earlier, about this being the right decision. But I also want you to know that if you need anything, help finding a new place, an advance on your salary, anything, just ask. I can't. Yes, you can. That's what I'm telling you. You can. Ava's voice was firm. You've spent 6 months doing everything alone. You don't have to anymore. Lucas felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Thank you, he managed. See you Monday. HR will email you the paperwork this afternoon. Lucas climbed out of the car and watched it pull away, disappearing into the flow of Brooklyn traffic. Then he turned and looked up at his apartment building. 4 flights of stairs, 1 bedroom, a landlord who was about to start eviction proceedings. Except now he had a job, a real job with a salary that would fix everything. Lucas took the stairs 2 at a time, his feet barely touching the ground. Mrs. Chen was in the hallway when he reached the 4th floor, carrying a bag of groceries that looked too heavy for someone her age. Let me help you with that, Lucas said, taking the bag before she could protest. Lucas, you're home early. I had an interview. It went well. Good, good. Mrs. Chen unlocked her apartment door. My son called you? He did. He shouldn't have. I told him to wait until June. Lucas set the groceries on her kitchen counter. Mrs. Chen, I want you to know I'm going to have the rent by the end of the month. All of it. I got the job. She studied his face, and Lucas saw the exact moment she decided to believe him. I'm glad, she said simply. You're a good tenant, a good father. I didn't want to. She trailed off, shaking her head. I know. And I appreciate you being patient. Mrs. Chen patted his arm. Go rest. You look tired. Lucas went back to his own apartment and stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the space like he was seeing it for the first time. The pull-out couch where he slept. The small TV balanced on a stack of milk crates. Sophie's drawings taped to every available wall surface. The kitchen table that wobbled no matter how many times he adjusted the legs. In a few weeks, they could leave this place. Find somewhere better. Somewhere with 2 bedrooms so Sophie could have her own space. Somewhere with heat that actually worked and water pressure that didn't require prayer. But looking at it now, Lucas felt something unexpected. Gratitude. This apartment had kept them alive. It had been shelter when they needed it. And yeah, it was falling apart and too small and in a building that should probably be condemned. But it had been home. Lucas pulled out his phone and called the one person he needed to tell. His mother answered on the third ring. "Lucas, is everything okay?" "Yeah, Mom, everything's okay. Better than okay." Lucas sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I got a job. A really good job." His mother made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Tell me everything." So he did. He told her about the missed elevator and the woman on the sidewalk and Sophie's fever and the interview that had somehow turned into a job offer. He told her about breakfast and Ava's car and the salary that would change everything. "She sounds special," his mother said when he finished. "This Ava person." "She's my boss, Mom." "I know what she is. I'm just saying she sounds special." "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just a mother who wants her son to be happy." "I am happy. I got the job. That's happy." His mother was quiet for a moment. "You know what your father would say right now?" Lucas closed his eyes. "That I should celebrate the win, but not forget the climb." "Exactly. You worked hard for this, Lucas. You earned it. I got lucky." "Luck is just preparation meeting opportunity. You were prepared. The opportunity came. That's not luck. That's life finally giving you what you deserved." They talked for another 20 minutes about logistics and plans, and when he could bring Sophie down to Pennsylvania to visit. By the time Lucas hung up, his mother was already planning a celebratory dinner for the next time they saw each other. Lucas set the phone down and just sat there in the quiet apartment. 4 days until Monday. 4 days until everything changed. He should do something productive. Start looking for a new apartment. Research the pediatric healthcare market. Learn everything he could about Orion Dynamics' existing products. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and opened his bank account. $37.42. In 2 weeks, that number would have 3 more digits. Lucas closed the laptop and allowed himself a moment to just breathe. To sit in this apartment that had been both prison and sanctuary. To think about his daughter, who was too smart for her own good and believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. To remember the woman on the sidewalk who had turned out to be so much more than she appeared. His phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line, "Welcome to Orion Dynamics new hire paperwork." Lucas opened it and found 17 documents that needed signatures, an employee handbook, and a personal note from Keisha. "Looking forward to having you on the team. Fair warning, Ava's already talking about expanding the pediatric division. You're going to have your hands full." That's a good thing, by the way. "See you Monday, Keisha." Lucas started working through the paperwork, reading every line because that's what responsible adults did. Tax forms and benefits elections and direct deposit information. When he got to the salary confirmation page, he stared at the number for a full minute. $140,000. It still didn't feel real. His phone rang, and Lucas answered without checking the caller ID. "Hello? Mr. Bennett, this is Robert Chen. I wanted to follow up on our conversation from yesterday." Lucas's good mood evaporated slightly. "Mr. Chen, I told you I'd have the money by the end of the month." "I know, and I believe you, but I wanted to call and apologize for being harsh yesterday. My mother reminded me that you've been a model tenant for 4 years, and one rough patch doesn't erase that." "Oh." Lucas wasn't sure what to say. "Thank you. That said, we do still need the payment by May 31st, but I wanted you to know we're rooting for you. My mother, especially. She talks about Sophie constantly." "Sophie's pretty memorable." "She is. Anyway, I'll let you go. Just wanted to clear the air." Robert hung up, leaving Lucas staring at his phone in confusion. People kept being nicer to him than he expected. Ava offering him the job, Keisha being welcoming, Mrs. Chen being patient, even Robert Chen calling to apologize. Maybe this was what happened when you stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. When you allowed yourself to believe that good things could actually happen. Or maybe he was just overthinking everything because that's what he did. Lucas went back to the paperwork, signing and initialing and checking boxes until his hand cramped. By the time he finished, it was past noon and his stomach was reminding him that he'd only eaten half his breakfast. He made a sandwich, peanut butter again, because old habits died hard, and ate it standing at the kitchen window, looking out at Brooklyn spread below him. 4 days until everything changed. 4 days until he became someone different, someone with a job and a future, and the ability to give his daughter the life she deserved. Lucas finished his sandwich and got to work on the rest of his life. 6 months later, Lucas stood in the kitchen of an apartment he still couldn't quite believe was his, watching Sophie build what she called a metabolic pathway model out of construction paper and pipe cleaners. "It's for my science project," she explained, not looking up from her work. "We're supposed to show how cells make energy, but everyone else is just doing poster boards. That's boring." "Boring is safe," Lucas said, pouring coffee into a mug that didn't have a chip in the rim. "Teachers like safe. Mrs. Kimura likes interesting. She said so on the first day of school." The new school, PS 118 in Park Slope, was a 40-minute subway ride from their apartment, but worth every minute. Better teachers, actual science equipment, a library that had books published in this century. Sophie had cried on her first day, not because she was scared, but because she was so happy to be there. Lucas understood the feeling. Their apartment was in a building that had functioning heat and water pressure that didn't require divine intervention. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that actually sealed against the cold. The rent was double what he'd been paying Mrs. Chen, but it didn't matter anymore because he could afford it. That still felt surreal sometimes. "Dad, can you hand me the green pipe cleaner?" Lucas found it in the pile of craft supplies that had taken over the kitchen table. "Here, what's this part?" "Mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell." Sophie said it with the kind of reverence most kids reserve for superheroes. "Did you know that mitochondria have their own DNA, separate from the rest of the cell? They're basically tiny organisms living inside us." "I did not know that." "Well, now you do." Sophie attached the pipe cleaner to her model with the precision of a surgeon. "Oh, and Ava's coming over tonight, right?" Lucas paused mid-sip. "How did you know that?" "She texted me." "She texted you?" "Yeah. She wanted to make sure you hadn't forgotten because apparently you forget stuff when you're stressed about work." Sophie finally looked up, her expression matter-of-fact. "You do forget stuff when you're stressed about work." "When did she get your number?" "Like 3 months ago. We text sometimes. She sends me articles about science stuff." Lucas wasn't sure how to feel about his 7-year-old daughter having a texting relationship with his boss, but then again, Ava had stopped feeling like just his boss somewhere around month 2. The Pediatric Healthcare Division had launched in August, 3 months after Lucas started, with a platform called Care Connect that helped families manage chronic illnesses at home. Remote monitoring for kids with diabetes, medication reminders for families dealing with asthma, direct messaging with healthcare providers that didn't require navigating phone trees and hold music. It worked. More importantly, it helped. Lucas had built the core architecture, but the real success came from his team. He'd hired 6 developers, all of them brilliant in different ways, and together they'd created something that actually mattered. Parents sent emails thanking them. Doctors recommended the platform to their patients. Within 4 months, Care Connect had 15,000 active users. Ava had been right. He did have his hands full, but it was the good kind of full. The kind that made him wake up excited to work instead of dreading another day of scrambling for freelance gigs that barely covered groceries. "What time is she coming?" Lucas asked, starting to clean up the breakfast dishes. 6. She said she's bringing Thai food. Sophie went back to her model. "The good kind, from that place in the village." "How does she know what the good kind is?" "Because I told her. We talked about it." Of course they did. Lucas finished the dishes and checked his phone. 2 messages from Keisha about the expansion proposal they were presenting to the board next week. One from James about a bug in the messaging system, and one from Ava, sent 20 minutes ago. "Still on for tonight? I can reschedule if you're swamped." Lucas typed back, "We're good. Sophie's already planning the menu. Of course she is. See you at 6. The truth was, Ava had been coming over for dinner about once a week for the past 2 months. It had started casually. She'd mentioned wanting to see how Care Connect worked in a real home environment, and Sophie had immediately invited her over. That first dinner had turned into a 3-hour conversation about everything from software design to Sophie's opinions on whether Pluto should be reinstated as a planet. The second dinner had been Ava's idea. Then the third. Now it was just something they did, and Lucas had stopped questioning it. He told himself it was professional networking, team building, a CEO staying connected to her employees. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. I'm heading to the office, Lucas said, grabbing his laptop bag. Margaret's picking you up after school? Margaret had followed them to Park Slope, moving into a building 2 blocks away. She claimed it was because her old neighborhood had gone downhill, but Lucas suspected she just wanted to stay close to Sophie. Yep, we're going to the library. Home by 5? Home by 5, Sophie confirmed. And Dad? Don't be weird tonight. I'm never weird. Sophie gave him a look that suggested she had a comprehensive list of times he'd been weird and could recite it from memory if necessary. Lucas kissed the top of her head and left before she could elaborate. The commute to Orion Dynamics took 45 minutes, but Lucas didn't mind. He used the time to answer emails and review code, and occasionally just watch the city pass by the subway window. Manhattan in November, the trees in Central Park losing their leaves, the sky that particular shade of gray that meant winter was coming. He'd lived in New York for 10 years, but it still surprised him sometimes. The way it could feel both enormous and intimate. The way you could be surrounded by 8 million people and still feel completely alone. Or find connection in the most unexpected places. Like an injured woman on a sidewalk who turned out to be the person who'd change his life. The office was already busy when Lucas arrived. The 12th floor had been renovated since he started. The pediatric division had its own wing now, all glass walls and standing desks and whiteboards covered in diagrams. His team was scattered across the open workspace. Maya debugging something while simultaneously eating what looked like her third breakfast, Daniel in a heated discussion with 2 of the designers about button placement, Rachel leading a video call with a hospital in Seattle. "Morning, boss," Maya said without looking up from her screen. "We've got a problem with the medication reminder push notifications. They're firing twice on iOS." Lucas set down his bag. "Since when?" "Since the update we pushed last night. Daniel's looking into it." "I found it," Daniel called from across the room. "Race condition in the notification handler. Give me 20 minutes. "You've got 15, Lucas said. "We promised Seattle the fix would deploy before their afternoon rounds." This was his life now. Managing a team, solving problems that actually mattered, building software that helped families instead of just generating revenue for shareholders who'd never used the product. Lucas settled at his desk and pulled up the expansion proposal. Next week's board meeting would determine whether they could grow Care Connect into new areas, mental health support for teenagers, physical therapy monitoring for kids with mobility issues, nutritional tracking for families dealing with food allergies. The proposal was solid. The data supported it, but boards cared about money first and impact second, and Lucas still wasn't entirely comfortable with that reality. His phone buzzed, Ava calling instead of texting. "Hey," Lucas answered. "What's up?" "Can you come to my office? I want to run something by you before the board meeting." "Give me 5 minutes." Ava's office was on the opposite end of the 12th floor, behind a door that was usually open but currently closed. Lucas knocked anyway. "Come in." Ava was at her desk, but instead of her usual suit, she wore jeans and a sweater that looked soft enough to be cashmere. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, and she looked tired in a way that made Lucas want to ask if she was sleeping enough. He didn't, because that crossed some professional line he was trying very hard to maintain. "The proposal looks good," Ava said, gesturing at her laptop screen. "But I think we should ask for more." "More? You're requesting budget for 10 additional developers and 2 years of runway. I think we should ask for 20 developers in 3 years." Lucas sat down in the chair across from her desk. "The board will never approve that." "They might. Care Connect's user growth is exceeding projections by 30%. Revenue is up. We've gotten press in the Times and the Journal. We have leverage. Or we could ask for what we actually need and have a better chance of getting it approved." Ava leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You're risk-averse." "I'm realistic." "Same thing sometimes." But she smiled when she said it. "Okay, we'll go with your numbers, but if they approve it easily, I'm saying I told you so." "Deal." They spent the next hour refining the proposal, arguing over projections and timelines and whether the mental health initiative should launch before or after the physical therapy monitoring. Ava pushed for ambitious targets. Lucas pushed for achievable ones. Somewhere in the middle, they found something that might actually work. "How's Sophie's science project coming?" Ava asked when they finally closed the laptop. "She's building a 3-dimensional model of cellular metabolism out of pipe cleaners." "Of course she is." Ava's expression softened in the way it always did when they talked about Sophie. That kid's going to cure cancer or colonize Mars. Maybe both. She'd tell you those aren't mutually exclusive goals. She'd be right. Lucas stood up to leave, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Always. Why do you keep coming to dinner? And don't say it's to see how Care Connect works in a home environment, because we both know you could get that data from user surveys. Ava was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming against the desk. Honestly, because I like your kid, and I like you. And I spend 60 hours a week in this building making decisions that affect hundreds of people, and it's exhausting. But having dinner with you and Sophie, talking about science projects and whether deep dish pizza counts as pizza, she paused. It's the only time I get to just be a person instead of the CEO. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. Plus, Sophie's hilarious, Ava added. Last week she explained to me why cryptocurrency is basically a Ponzi scheme with better marketing. She's 7. She heard me ranting about it. Still, the delivery was flawless. Lucas found himself smiling. See you at 6, Yum. See you at 6. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and code reviews, and putting out small fires before they became big ones. By the time Lucas left the office, it was already dark outside, the city lit up against the November sky. He stopped at the grocery store on the way home and bought ingredients for a salad because Ava always insisted they needed vegetables to balance out the Thai food. The woman at the register, someone Lucas had seen a dozen times but never actually talked to, smiled at him. Big dinner plans? Just a friend coming over. Must be a good friend. You're buying the expensive lettuce. Lucas looked down at the organic spring mix in his basket. When had he started buying the expensive lettuce? He paid and walked the 3 blocks to his apartment building, taking the stairs 2 at a time because the elevator was slow and he had nervous energy to burn. Sophie was already home, her science project spread across the living room floor. Margaret sat on the couch with a book, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. There you are, Margaret said. Sophie's been monitoring the clock like she's waiting for a launch sequence. I have not, Sophie protested, even though she clearly had. Margaret, you're welcome to stay for dinner. Oh no, honey, 3's company, 4's a crowd. Margaret gathered her things with a knowing smile that made Lucas's face heat up. You kids have fun. She left before Lucas could argue. She thinks you like Ava, Sophie said, still working on her model. Of course I like Ava. She's my boss. Not like that. Like her. Lucas set down the grocery bag more forcefully than necessary. We're friends, Sophie. Okay, Sophie said in a tone that meant she absolutely did not believe him. Lucas escaped to the kitchen and started making the salad, grateful for something to do with his hands. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Sophie got there first, throwing it open to reveal Ava holding 2 bags of Thai food and wearing jeans and a jacket that looked nothing like CEO attire. I got spring rolls, Ava announced, and that mango sticky rice you like. Yes. Sophie took one of the bags and headed to the kitchen. Dad's making salad because he thinks we need vegetables. Your dad's right. Vegetables are important. You sound like him. Lucas emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Thanks for bringing food. Thanks for having me. Ava handed him the second bag, and their fingers brushed briefly. How was your afternoon? Fixed 3 bugs, prevented 1 minor crisis, and convinced Maya that she can't survive on coffee and granola bars alone. Sounds productive. They set the food out on the table, pad thai and green curry and those spring rolls Sophie loved. The salad Lucas made looked sad next to the vibrant colors of the takeout, but he served it anyway because at least he'd tried. Dinner conversation flowed easily, the way it always did. Sophie talked about her science project and how her teacher had already said it was very ambitious. Ava talked about the board meeting and her concerns that they were asking for too little instead of too much. Lucas mediated between them, adding context where needed and occasionally reminding Sophie to actually eat instead of just talking. After dinner, Sophie demonstrated her metabolic pathway model, explaining each component with the enthusiasm of someone presenting groundbreaking research. So the glucose comes in here, she said, pointing to a section made of yellow pipe cleaners. And the mitochondria break it down into ATP, which is basically cell fuel. It's called cellular respiration, but it's not the same as breathing, even though it sounds like it should be. Ava listened with complete attention, asking questions that suggested she actually understood what Sophie was talking about. What made you pick this topic? Ava asked. I wanted to understand how my body makes energy. Like, I eat a sandwich and somehow that becomes me being able to run around at recess. That's weird, right? That food becomes movement? When you put it that way, it is pretty weird. Everything's weird if you think about it long enough, Sophie said sagely. After Sophie went to bed, protesting that 8:30 was too early for someone in third grade, Lucas and Ava cleaned up the kitchen in comfortable silence. She's going to be something incredible when she grows up, Ava said, drying a plate. She already is. Fair point. Ava set down the dish towel. Lucas, can I ask you something? The shift in her tone made Lucas look up. Sure. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't twisted my ankle that day? If you'd made it to the interview on time and I'd never called down to have them wait for you? Lucas thought about it while he rinsed the last of the dishes. Honestly, I try not to, because thinking about all the ways things could have gone wrong makes me appreciate how they went right. He turned off the water and faced her. But yeah, sometimes I think about it, and it scares me. Me too. They stood there in his kitchen, the dishwasher humming in the background, and Lucas realized how close they were standing, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her gray-green eyes, close enough that if he leaned forward just slightly. Dad? Sophie's voice came from her bedroom. Can you come here for a second? Lucas stepped back, the moment broken. I should, of course, go. Sophie was sitting up in bed, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. What's wrong, kiddo? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to tell you something. Lucas sat on the edge of her bed. What is it? I like how things are now. Our apartment and my school and Ava coming over for dinner. Sophie's expression was serious. But I also remember how things were before, when you were sad all the time and we couldn't afford stuff and you thought I didn't notice. Soph, I'm not mad about it. I just want you to know that I noticed, and I'm glad you're not sad anymore. Lucas felt his throat tighten. I'm glad too. Also, I think Ava likes you. Likes you. And I think you like her back, but you're being weird about it because she's your boss or whatever. Sophie, I'm just saying, in case you were wondering if I'd be okay with it. Which I would be. Okay with it, I mean. Sophie lay back down, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Okay, now you can go. I just needed to tell you that. Lucas kissed her forehead. Love you, kiddo. Love you too, don't be dumb. When Lucas returned to the kitchen, Ava was putting on her jacket. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, she just wanted to say goodnight. I should probably head out anyway. Early meeting tomorrow. Lucas walked her to the door, suddenly aware of how quiet the apartment had gotten. Thanks for coming, he said. Sophie always looks forward to it. Just Sophie? Ava's tone was light, but there was something underneath it, a question she wasn't quite asking. No, not just Sophie. Ava smiled, and it was different from her CEO smile or her professional smile. It was real and a little uncertain and entirely directed at him. Good, because I look forward to it too. She left before Lucas could figure out what to say to that, and he stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her disappear down the stairs. Back in the kitchen, his phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Well, did you tell her? Lucas stared at the message. Tell her what, exactly? That somewhere between the missed elevator and now, she'd become more than his boss? That having dinner with her and Sophie felt like the best part of his week? That he was terrified of screwing it up because she was the CEO and he was an employee and there were rules about this kind of thing? He typed back, There's nothing to tell. Liar. Lucas put the phone down and started turning off the lights. Sophie was right. He was being dumb. But he was also being careful. Because 6 months ago, he'd been unemployed and desperate, and now he had a job he loved and a daughter who was thriving and a life that finally felt stable. Risking that for something that might not even be what he thought it was seemed like the fastest way to lose everything he'd fought so hard to build. Even if the way Ava had smiled at him tonight suggested maybe, possibly, it wasn't just in his head. Lucas checked on Sophie one more time, sound asleep, her metabolic pathway model still spread across the living room floor, and then got ready for bed himself. Tomorrow he'd focus on the board proposal, on his team, on the work that had given him his life back. Tomorrow, he'd be professional and focused and definitely not thinking about the way Ava had asked if it was just Sophie who looked forward to dinner. Tomorrow, he'd have his head on straight, But tonight, lying in bed in an apartment he could actually afford, Lucas let himself think about possibilities. About the difference between being careful and being scared. About whether the best things in life were the ones you planned for or the ones that found you when you weren't looking. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Ava. "Thanks for dinner. See you tomorrow." Lucas read it 3 times before responding. "Anytime." Then he added, before he could overthink it, "Really, anytime." The response came almost immediately. "I'm going to hold you to that." Lucas smiled at his phone in the darkness of his bedroom, feeling like a teenager with a crush. Sophie was right. He was being dumb. But maybe being dumb wasn't always a bad thing. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon, which gave Lucas exactly 4 hours to second-guess every decision he'd made in the past 6 months. He sat in conference room A with Keisha and James, going over the presentation one more time. The numbers were solid. The user testimonials were compelling. The growth projections were conservative enough to be believable, but ambitious enough to be exciting. It should have been enough. "You're doing the thing again," Keisha said without looking up from her laptop. "What thing?" "The thing where you convince yourself we're about to fail even though all the evidence suggests otherwise." James nodded. "She's right. You've been tapping your pen against the table for 10 minutes. It's driving me insane." Lucas set down the pen. "Sorry. I just keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "Name one," Keisha challenged. "The board thinks we're overreaching. They cut our budget instead of expanding it. We have to lay off half the team. That's 3 things, and none of them are going to happen." Keisha closed her laptop. "Lucas, listen to me. 6 months ago, Care Connect didn't exist. Now it's helping 15,000 families manage chronic illnesses. Hospitals are reaching out to us. We've been featured in major publications. The board would be idiots to say no. Boards have been known to do idiotic things. Not this one. Ava runs a tight ship." At the mention of Ava's name, Lucas felt his stomach do something complicated. He'd barely seen her all week. She'd been in back-to-back meetings preparing for today, and their usual dinner had been postponed twice. He missed her, which was ridiculous and unprofessional and exactly the kind of thing he was trying not to think about. 5 minutes, James said, checking his watch. "We should head up." The executive boardroom was on the 14th floor, a space Lucas had only seen once during his initial tour of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, a long table made of dark wood that probably cost more than his car, and chairs that looked like they belonged in a design museum. 8 board members were already seated. Lucas recognized a few faces from the company website, venture capitalists and former CEOs, and people who made decisions about millions of dollars the way normal people decided what to have for lunch. Ava sat at the head of the table, and when she caught Lucas's eye, she smiled. Just a small, quick thing that nobody else would have noticed. It steadied him anyway. "Let's begin," Ava said, her voice carrying that particular authority that made people pay attention. "Lucas Bennett, our Director of Pediatric Healthcare Development, is here to present our expansion proposal. Lucas, the floor is yours." Lucas stood up, connected his laptop to the projection system, and took a breath. Then he did what he'd been doing for 6 months. He told the truth. He talked about the families using Care Connect, the single mother in Detroit managing her son's type 1 diabetes, the father in Seattle whose daughter's asthma attacks had decreased by 40% since they started using the remote monitoring system, the grandmother in Phoenix raising 2 grandchildren with severe food allergies who'd said the platform had given her life back. He showed them the numbers, user growth, engagement metrics, revenue projections, but he didn't let the data tell the whole story. "Here's what the numbers don't show," Lucas said, pulling up an email he'd received 2 weeks ago. This is from a mother whose 6-year-old daughter has cystic fibrosis. She wrote, "Before Care Connect, I spent 3 hours a day on the phone with doctors, pharmacies, and insurance companies. Now I spend those 3 hours with my daughter. Thank you for giving me my time back." The room was quiet. "We're proposing an expansion that would add mental health support for teenagers, physical therapy monitoring for kids with mobility issues, and nutritional tracking for families managing complex dietary needs. We're asking for 20 additional developers, 3 years of runway, and a budget increase of 40%. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s named Patricia something, leaned forward. "That's a significant investment. What's the expected ROI?" Lucas had prepared for this question. He had spreadsheets and financial models and conservative estimates that showed profitability within 18 months. But standing there, looking at these people who measured success in percentage points and quarterly earnings, he found himself saying something different. The return on investment isn't just financial. It's a kid who can participate in gym class because their physical therapy is actually working. It's a teenager who doesn't feel alone in their mental health struggles. It's a family who can afford to eat safely because they're not wasting money on food their child can't have. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That's very noble, Mr. Bennett, but this is a business. I know it's a business. I also know that the businesses that survive aren't the ones that maximize short-term profits. They're the ones that create value people actually need. Lucas pulled up the financial projections. Our current subscriber base is growing at 32% month over month. Our churn rate is under 5%, which is unheard of in healthcare tech. We're profitable now, and will be significantly more profitable if we expand into these adjacent markets. Another board member, Marcus, who'd been at Orion since the beginning, spoke up. What happens if the expansion fails? What's the fallback plan? Lucas glanced at Ava, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. The fallback plan is that we've still helped 15,000 families and counting. We've still built something that works, and we use what we learned from the failure to try again, smarter. Lucas closed his laptop. But I don't think we're going to fail. Our team is excellent, our product is proven, and the market need is clear. All we need is the resources to scale what we've already built. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Lucas answered them as honestly as he could, admitting when he didn't know something and promising to follow up with data where he had it. Finally, Ava called for a vote. All in favor of approving the expansion proposal as presented? 7 hands went up. Patricia abstained, her expression neutral. It was enough. Motion carries, Ava said, and Lucas felt something release in his chest. Lucas, Keisha, James, excellent work. We'll schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss implementation timeline. The board members filed out, most of them stopping to shake Lucas's hand or offer congratulations. Patricia was the last to leave, and she paused by his chair. You're very passionate about this work, she said. Yes, ma'am. That's good. But don't let passion make you reckless. 40% budget increase is significant. Don't waste it. I won't. She nodded and left, and Lucas finally allowed himself to breathe normally. Keisha hugged him. Told you we'd win. You were right. I'm always right. You should get that tattooed somewhere so you don't forget. James clapped him on the shoulder. Drinks tonight? My treat. Can't. I have plans. Keisha and James exchanged a look that Lucas pretended not to see. Plans with anyone we know? Keisha asked innocently. Just dinner? With Sophie? And Ava? Right, just a casual dinner with the CEO. Totally normal. Lucas gathered his laptop. It is normal. For us. Sure it is, James said. And I'm the King of England. Lucas left before they could interrogate him further, taking the stairs down to the 12th floor because he had too much nervous energy to wait for an elevator. His team was clustered around Maya's desk when he arrived, clearly waiting for news. We got it, Lucas announced, and the cheers were loud enough that people from other departments looked over to see what was happening. Maya hugged him, then Rachel, then Daniel, and soon Lucas was surrounded by his entire team celebrating a win that felt earned. 20 new developers, Maya said. We're going to need a bigger office. We're going to need a lot of things, but we'll figure it out. His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. My office when you're done celebrating. Lucas excused himself and walked to the other end of the floor. Ava's door was open, and she was standing by the window, looking out at the city. You did good in there, she said without turning around. Thanks. I wasn't sure about that bit at the end, the part about failure. It was the right thing to say. Honesty plays better than false confidence. Ava finally turned to face him. 40% budget increase, that's a lot of trust. I know, I won't waste it. I know you won't. She walked over to her desk and picked up a folder. There's something I need to talk to you about. About us. Lucas's heart rate picked up. Okay, we've been doing this thing for months now. Dinners, texting, pretending it's just friendship when we both know it's not. Ava's voice was steady, but Lucas could see the tension in her shoulders. And I've been telling myself it's fine because we're both adults and we can handle it professionally. But I don't think that's true anymore. Ava, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm your boss. There are rules about this kind of thing, power dynamics and HR policies, and about a dozen reasons why this is a terrible idea. Lucas felt something cold settle in his stomach. So what are you saying? I'm saying I don't care about the rules. Ava met his eyes. I care about you, and I think you care about me, and I'm tired of pretending that's not happening. The relief was so strong, Lucas almost laughed. You're terrible at this, you know that? At what? At telling someone you like them. You made it sound like you were about to fire me. I'm not firing you, Ava stopped, a smile breaking through her serious expression. Okay, yeah, I'm terrible at this. I run a tech company. I give presentations to boards and negotiate contracts and make decisions about millions of dollars. But this? I have no idea what I'm doing. That makes two of us. So what do we do? Lucas thought about all the reasons this was complicated. The professional boundaries, the potential for gossip, the risk of losing what they already had. Then he thought about Sophie saying he was being dumb, about Margaret's knowing smiles, about the way Ava looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. We could start with dinner, Lucas said. Just the two of us this time. No Sophie as a buffer. Like a date? Yeah, like a date. Ava smiled, and it was the real smile again, the one she saved for him and Sophie. I'd like that. Me too. They stood there in her office, grinning at each other like idiots, until Ava's phone rang and reality came crashing back. I have to take this, she said apologetically. I know. I'll see you tonight? 6:30. And Lucas? Where's something nice? I'm taking you to a real restaurant this time. No takeout. Lucas left her office feeling like he was floating slightly above the ground. He made it back to his desk before pulling out his phone and texting Margaret. I need you to watch Sophie tonight. Long story. We'll explain later. It's about time. I'll be there at 6. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lucas tried to focus on work, but his brain kept circling back to Ava's words. I care about you. By the time he left the office, he'd accomplished roughly nothing except rereading the same email 4 times and accidentally approving a budget request he'd meant to question. Sophie was finishing her homework when Lucas got home, Margaret supervising from the couch. Dad! Sophie looked up. Did the board approve the expansion? They did. I knew they would. Your presentation was really good. You didn't see my presentation. You practiced it for me 3 times. I basically memorized it. Sophie closed her textbook. So why is Margaret here? Lucas glanced at Margaret, who was doing an extremely poor job of hiding her smile. I have dinner plans tonight. With Ava. You always have dinner plans with Ava. This is different. It's just the two of us. Sophie's eyes went wide. Like a date? Yeah, like a date. Sophie jumped up and hugged him. Finally! I told you to stop being dumb. You did. You were right. I'm always right. You should get that tattooed somewhere. Lucas laughed, remembering Keisha saying almost the exact same thing earlier. Go finish your homework. I'm already done, but I'll go to my room so you can get ready without me watching. Sophie grabbed her backpack. Oh, and Dad? Don't overthink it. She already likes you. After Sophie disappeared into her room, Margaret stood up and patted Lucas's arm. That kid's smarter than both of you combined. I know. Don't mess this up. I'll try not to. Margaret left, and Lucas stood in his apartment trying to remember the last time he'd been on an actual date. Before Sophie was born, definitely. Maybe before Sophie's mother got pregnant. That was almost 8 years ago. He showered and changed into the one nice shirt he owned that wasn't for work, a dark blue button-down Sophie had helped him pick out at a department store sale. He attempted to do something with his hair, gave up, and settled for making sure it wasn't actively sticking up. His phone buzzed. Ava. Picking you up in 15. Don't argue. Lucas smiled and typed back, wasn't going to. Sophie emerged from her room as Lucas was putting on his shoes. You look nice, she said. Thanks, kiddo. Are you nervous? A little. Don't be. She's seen you at your worst. If she still likes you, you're probably fine. Lucas hugged his daughter. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just notice it more now. The knock on the door came exactly 15 minutes later. Lucas opened it to find Ava in a dress that made his brain short-circuit temporarily. Hi, she said. Hi. You look... Words failed him. Really nice. So do you. Ava looked past him. Is Sophie here? I should say hi. I'm here, Sophie appeared in the hallway. You look really pretty. Thank you. I like your dinosaur shirt. Thanks. It's a T-Rex, but anatomically accurate. Sophie looked between them. You two should go before you're late for your reservation. We don't have a... Ava started, then stopped. How did you know I made a reservation? Because you plan everything. Obviously, you made a reservation. Sophie gave them both a gentle push toward the door. Have fun. Don't worry about me. Margaret and I are going to watch a documentary about deep-sea creatures. Bedtime is 8:30, Lucas said. I know, Dad. I've lived here for 6 months. Ava took Lucas's hand, and they left before Sophie could offer any more helpful commentary. The restaurant Ava had chosen was in the West Village, the kind of place with soft lighting and cloth napkins and prices that weren't listed on the menu. This is too much, Lucas said as they were seated. It's not too much. I wanted to take you somewhere nice. You always take me somewhere nice. You brought Thai food to my apartment. That's different. This is... Ava paused. I want this to feel different, special. It already does. They ordered wine that Lucas couldn't pronounce and food that came in tiny portions but tasted incredible. The conversation flowed easily, the way it always did between them. But there was something new underneath it, a possibility that hadn't existed before. Can I ask you something? Ava said after the waiter cleared their appetizer plates. Always. That day on the sidewalk, if I hadn't been the CEO, if I'd just been a random person you helped, would you still have stopped? Lucas didn't have to think about it. Yes. Even knowing it might cost you the interview? Even then. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. And because I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd walked past. Lucas took a sip of wine. My dad used to say that the choices you make when nobody's watching are the ones that define you. And yeah, people were watching that day, but I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about you, hurt and alone, and everyone just stepping over you like you didn't matter. Ava reached across the table and took his hand. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were different. That you were someone worth knowing. She squeezed his fingers. I've built this entire company on the idea that technology should help people. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that helping people starts with small moments, individual choices. You reminded me of that. I was just doing what anyone... Don't minimize it, Lucas. You changed my life that day. Not because you carried me into the building or because you turned out to be a brilliant developer, but because you saw someone who needed help and you helped them. Without calculating the cost, without thinking about what you'd get in return. Lucas felt his throat tighten. You changed my life too. By giving you a job? By giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one. By believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. He met her eyes. By becoming someone I can't imagine not having in my life. Ava smiled, and this time there were tears in her eyes. So what do we do now? We figure it out, together. Lucas squeezed her hand back. It's going to be complicated. The office dynamics, the gossip, navigating the professional boundaries. I know, but I think it's worth it. So do I. They finished dinner talking about everything and nothing, Sophie's latest science obsession, the expansion timeline, whether it was possible to make good pizza outside of New York. When the check came, Ava paid before Lucas could even pretend to argue. Outside the restaurant, the November air was cold enough to see their breath. Ava shivered, and Lucas offered her his jacket without thinking. I'm supposed to be impressing you, Ava protested, not the other way around. Too late. I'm already impressed. They walked through the village, not really going anywhere, just enjoying being together without the buffer of work, or Sophie, or pretending this was something other than what it was. I should probably get back, Lucas said eventually. Margaret's great, but I don't like leaving Sophie too long. I understand. Ava stopped walking and turned to face him. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for planning it. Can we do this again? Yeah, definitely. Ava leaned up and kissed him. It was brief and soft and somehow both tentative and certain at the same time. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I've wanted to do that for months. Me too. Why didn't you? Because I was scared of screwing up the best thing that's happened to me in years. You're not going to screw it up, Lucas. Neither of us are. Ava took his hand again. We're going to figure this out because we're both smart and we care about each other, and we're willing to do the work. They walked back to where Ava had parked her car, not the company car with David driving, but her personal car, a sensible sedan that somehow made her seem more real. The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet, the kind of comfortable silence that came from not needing to fill every moment with words. When they pulled up to Lucas's building, Ava turned off the engine. "I know I said I wanted tonight to feel different," she said, "but the truth is, everything with you feels different. Better. For me, too. I should let you go. Sophie's waiting." But neither of them moved. Finally, Lucas leaned over and kissed her again, taking his time this time, memorizing the moment. When they broke apart, Ava was grinning. "Okay, now you really need to go before I forget I'm supposed to be a responsible adult." Lucas laughed and got out of the car, but he leaned back in through the window. "See you tomorrow?" "See you tomorrow." He watched her drive away, then headed inside, taking the stairs because the elevator was slow, and he needed time to process everything that had just happened. Margaret was still on the couch when Lucas let himself into the apartment, her documentary paused on the TV. "Sophie's asleep," she said. "How was dinner?" "Good. Really good." "Good enough that you're going to stop dancing around each other?" "Yeah, I think so." Margaret smiled and gathered her things. "About time. That girl's been crazy about you since the day you helped her on that sidewalk." After Margaret left, Lucas checked on Sophie. She was sprawled across her bed, her stuffed rabbit on the floor, her latest library book open on her nightstand. Lucas picked up the rabbit and tucked it under her arm. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "We're going to be okay," he whispered to his sleeping daughter. "All of us." He went to his own room and lay down, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. 6 months ago, he'd been desperate and unemployed, racing through a lobby chasing an elevator that had already left. Now he had a job he loved, a daughter who was thriving, and a woman who made him believe in possibilities he'd stopped allowing himself to imagine. His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Thank you for tonight. I know we said tomorrow, but I'm already looking forward to it." Lucas smiled and typed back, "Me too. Sleep well. You too. Tell Sophie I said hi when she wakes up. She's going to be insufferable about this, you know. She's been telling us to stop being dumb for months. She's not wrong. She rarely is." Lucas set down his phone and closed his eyes, feeling more content than he had in years. The truth was, that day on the sidewalk had changed everything, but not in the way he'd expected. He'd thought the turning point was getting the job, securing the future, finding stability after months of chaos. But the real change had been simpler than that. It had been choosing compassion when it would have been easier to choose convenience. It had been stopping to help someone when everyone else walked past. It had been remembering that success wasn't just about what you achieved, but about who you became while achieving it. Lucas had spent 6 months building software that helped families. But before that, he'd spent 7 years building a life for his daughter. And before that, he'd been raised by a father who believed helping people wasn't about obligation or reward. It was about recognizing that you could make someone's day better and choosing to do it. That was the lesson Sophie had been watching him teach her, even during the hardest months. That was what Ava had seen in him on that sidewalk. That was what had brought them all here, to this moment, to this life that felt earned and fragile and worth protecting. Lucas drifted off to sleep thinking about tomorrow, about the expansion they'd launch and the families they'd help, and the dinner he'd already planned in his head for next week. About Sophie's science project and Ava's smile and the way his apartment finally felt like home. About second chances and missed elevators, and how sometimes the smallest choices created the biggest transformations. Because in the end, that's what it had been, a choice. Not to get the job, or impress the CEO, or change his life. Just to help someone who needed it. Everything else had followed.